Tomorrow I need to go down to the DMV and take a driving license test because my license expired when I was living overseas. But my parents have a new car with a lot of more advanced features. So I can back up and see, what's behind me on the screen. There's automatic lights that go on and off. I think the turn signal even. There's a lot of extra bells and whistles. So I feel almost like it's cheating because I won't have to really be as aware of everything that's going on around me. The car will do a lot of the heavy lifting. On the one hand, this makes, driving safer for everybody. But on the other hand, it means newer drivers don't really have to learn all those emergency skills that protect them when they're driving. I'm bringing this up because I was at a conference in Vegas a couple of days ago, and there was a lot of talk about AI technologies and writing in general. I gave a presentation about authentic creativity in the face of artificial intelligence, which I put an article on my blog, and I think when the conference videos are available on YouTube, I'll be able to share those as well. I see a lot of stuff on Reddit that I think is really interesting. Comments like, if you use AI at all for anything, then you're not a real writer, or it's okay for people who are not real writers to use AI, people who are just hobbyists, but anybody who calls themselves an author shouldn't use it. Make a video just talking really briefly in general about AI technologies and writing around the concept of what it means to be an author, because I feel like a lot of people aspire to become an author, and what they think that means is people recognize their worth or their quality in terms of writing. They've done it themselves. They've done the hard work. They've done the creativity. Doesn't necessarily mean you're published traditionally or that you sell any books. People say you're an author, if you write something and you publish it. But on a creative side, a lot of people still think that if you relied on too many external tools, if you didn't do it all yourself, then you're not a real author in some sense. My response to that, as most authors have figured out when they start to publish their book, is that there's a lot of moving parts. I've tried publishing books lots of different ways. I've written millions of words all by myself, without spell check. Doesn't necessarily make my work better, but I have put in the time and effort to master these skills. But I've also played with ghostwriting or co-writing where somebody else may help with the rough draft. I've had conversations with friends about, where's the value in writing a book? Maybe I do the outline and the editing and someone else does the rough draft, or maybe vice versa. I know pantsers who will just write one draft and then send it off to an editor to get fixed up and prepared. I also know plotters and, idea people who, like me, maybe will get a rough draft developed so we have some raw content to work on. You may say, well, that's all human. Those are two different parts of creativity, and it's human no matter who's doing the work. But now there are some tools that can do some of that for you, whether it's, generating a fantasy name. You don't need to always spend the mental bandwidth to solve every problem in writing a book. Sometimes you just need to Google, I need a Spanish medieval name that might have been common in the 1600s. You look for those answers or that knowledge that you don't have to fulfill the vision that you want to achieve. The other thing I saw on Reddit today I thought was kind of interesting. Someone was saying they are worried about AI because there used to be a cost to entry. Publishing used to be hard and expensive, so not everybody could afford to do it. I think it was the same post, or it might have been a different post, where they were complaining about how only the rich people can afford to publish, and how, people with money who don't have to pay for cover design or editing or any of those things, they have an unnatural advantage because they have the time and the money to invest in doing the work in a way that, not everybody does. One of the things I pointed out in my talk in Vegas was that there used to be this really common, these rules to hiring services where it could be good, fast, or cheap, and you had to pick two. And that was always sort of the barrier where for most authors, it's a ton of work to publish a book because there's so many new skills or abilities that we don't really have the skill set to produce our stories published professionally. With some new AI technologies, a lot of that resistance barrier has been removed, which for me is sort of a positive thing in general, because, for example, in fantasy art, it used to be the case where only people who can commission the art or the pictures that they want to see painted, or only the artists, who are trying to make money, paint the things that people with money want to see. You get an inherent cultural bias in the artwork. And now that there are AI generative technology, everybody has the opportunity to tell their stories or to share their vision without, going through the middleman of the skilled artists who are necessary to achieve that vision. It's true in general that AI technology is very scary for humanity. It replaces a ton of service jobs, and there's going to be a lot of disruption in the next couple of years. But it is also true that some of these tools allow authors without a budget to put out a more professional version of their story. Maybe they wouldn't have hired a cover designer or a narrator or an editor, and so they just could not publish a professional book without a budget in the past. That has changed, so that is scary for the people who have a lot of money or who have developed a lot of skills and become a good author. But it's a little bit like the erasing of student loans, where it's not really fair that new people don't have to pay off their loans. On the other hand, it's also not fair that college has gotten so much more expensive and the rates on the loans have gotten more and more outlandish, so that, there's not really a fair one-to-one comparison. The thing I mentioned in Vegas is that authors don't really need to fear getting replaced for a couple of reasons. So the first thing is that all of the skills you developed because you wanted to learn how to write a good book are skills that other people in the future may not have. So they will not be able to write books as good as you will be able to write them, because they never had to go through the learning curve of gaining the information. They can still write books easier, and they may be pretty good, but you should be able to write even better books, because the truth about AI is that, it'll make a pretty decent amateur mediocre novel. It's very good with prose and sentence, but it right now doesn't have the capacity to, have a very well structured, powerful, meaningful novel. But the other truth is most authors aren't writing those anyway. And there's this really weird romantic ideology where if you write commercial books on purpose, which means people like to read your books that people enjoy are commercial books. A lot of authors, they are told that you should just write for yourself and tell your story and that nothing else really matters. And the problem is when they try to market it or get it out there, there's just not a good response or engagement, because they intentionally didn't write a book people wanted to read, and then they think that makes them more of a real author, or they are the pure artist. There's a dichotomy between Stephen Pressfield's work, which annoys me a lot. Everybody loves his first book, which is The War of Art, which is all about how art is a struggle and you just have to push through and finish the thing. But most people aren't familiar with Stephen Pressfield's later book, Nobody Wants to Read Your Shit, which is really deep, detailed craft, because he says basically if you want to write a good book that people enjoy reading, there are rules and structure. So it's very different from the first book, and you really have to know about both of them if you want to be a successful writer writing books that people want to read. But a lot of authors latch on to that piece or that belief that their book has more value because they are doing it for the right reasons. And it's not really about skill or craft or ability. It's all about the spontaneous overflow of powerful emotion, which is a Wordsworth poet romantic ideological view that a lot of new authors, amateur from amare, which is love, people who do it for the love. Most new authors strenuously believe and say they don't care about making money. They don't care if only one reader enjoys it, it's fine. But then they are not making books people want to read on purpose. AI won't replace you or won't replace literature is that, on the one hand, people don't know how to write good books, and they're going to use AI to write a bunch of fluff. People say AI slop, and there will be a lot of it, but that won't really compete. On Amazon, the first 10,000, 20,000 books out of 5 million books ever get seen by people because they're in the top 100 ranks. Everything else doesn't show up. It's not getting seen. If it doesn't have reviews, if people aren't enjoying it or buying it, even if someone spent a bunch of money on an AI book and it just wasn't good, readers wouldn't like it. It wouldn't be successful. So the danger is if readers enjoy the AI books more, which I think is very likely because the majority of authors are not writing books readers want to read. So somebody without any skills who uses AI to write a very commercial book and hit all the tropes, they might be more successful than the pure artist who writes something without any structure, who doesn't follow any writing advice, who didn't get a developmental editor. Basically people who say, I have the best story, but then they just couldn't pull it off in terms of quality because writing is a learnable skill that takes time to master. People who aren't writing commercial books on purpose don't really have a lot to fear from AI, but they're also probably not doing very well right now if people aren't already enjoying the books that they're putting out there. And so there is a danger of people who are committed to writing books people want to read as a business. However, they're developing those books. As long as readers are happy with the quality of the writing, they are good enough. And someone without a lot of knowledge could probably use AI to write a good enough book that's fine, but not really great. The people who are really going to succeed are the people who are already on board with, I want to write good books for my readers that my readers enjoy. It's less about me defining myself as an author or being seen as a real author. That's not what motivates or drives me. It might have been when I started 20 years ago. I definitely had all those same ideas and assumptions about who I wanted to become or what it would mean to be an author, but nobody really values your hard work. The first few books I wrote and worked really hard on, they weren't very good, or even if they were good, they weren't what other people wanted to read. So even if I was really proud of them, handing out copies at work or whatever, they didn't make an impact on other people because they weren't what other people enjoyed. So since then, I've really made a decision to focus on, I have skills, I understand literature, I understand writing. I'm going to write the best books I can with the definition that the best books are the ones that other people enjoy. So there are writers like me, and I met a lot of writers at the conference also who similarly have written a lot of books on their own. They have an audience, they have their own style. They're not trying to, cheat by producing better writing that they don't have the skill set to produce. They're just trying to automate and speed things up a little bit by choosing some of the things that maybe aren't creative or that aren't enjoyable. In my talk, I talked about triggers and glimmers. Are the things that you don't want to do and you avoid, and glimmers are the things that you enjoy that bring you happiness. So you want to experiment with AI and see if you can get all of those triggers off your plate so that you have more enthusiasm and energy to do the creative work that you enjoy. I can make a lot of that process easier and less expensive for most authors. You won't be able to prompt the AI to make really, really good work unless you understand what really, really good work is, unless you understand story structure and dramatic conflict and tension and all the other stuff that I talk a lot about on YouTube, because when you're writing and when you're editing, story is really important. You need a strong, things have to be happening, but also the intrigue and suspense and mystery is a lot about controlling the information and delivering things in a way that pulls readers in and keeps their attention. With Mark Zuckerberg and Chloe Abrams recently about AI, and she mentioned basically that there were resistance points that were necessary because they make you learn all the skills that you need to go through that process and gain mastery. But then there are also places where that resistance is just not positive and not helpful. It just gets in the way of the things that you want to do. And that particular skill set is not worth your time and investment to master, because it won't really provide any tangible benefit. So there are some places where the skills are valuable and necessary, where the process of gaining mastery is critical. And we're sort of entering a new age where previously the people who gained those particular skills, maybe like lawyers or doctors, they have a very valuable skill set, which means we trust them a lot and we pay them a lot of money. But now there are AI tools that are making less mistakes than doctors and lawyers and cost a lot less. And also there's less, implicit cultural bias. There's a lot of advantages. They're not there yet, but we're starting to think about, how much do we pay for these different jobs? Where's the real value? Is it in just the knowledge of information, specialized skill set, or the ability to produce and make something new? It is scary for creative people who have been trying to learn these skills to suddenly feel like they are being replaced. But I think it's more scary for people who identify as a real author, who this is their personal identity. So it's threatening to their sense of, existential purpose. Those same authors are already wrestling with a lot of insecurity, because there's always going to be a disconnect between following your passion, writing the story that you want to write without, formal training or without trying to hit a market. The fact that even if they do it right in the creative way with pure inspiration and little craft, they may not be successful, because that's not the way to intentionally write a good book that people enjoy. There have always been different business models. You have sort of the Patterson model, where he started writing books, but now he has a bunch of ghostwriters who use his name, his brand name, and put out a lot of thrillers that are similar to the ones that he wrote. Maybe the George R.R. Martin style of writing, where he writes each book himself as an artistic process, but he's struggled to finish the work that everybody is expecting. For the people who struggle with their sense of artistic integrity, the pure artists who are writers, they need to kind of dig into what does it mean to be authentically creative? What is creativity? What does it mean to be human? Some of the stuff I mentioned in my talk was about how, creativity is always something outside of us. It's not who we really are as humans. It's being touched by the inspiration of the muse, and also sometimes particular drugs or technology that we have used: coffee, sugar, tobacco, the printing press. We've never had a technological shift like this before. AI really is something tragically different that we have been discussing and talking about since the beginning of humanity, which I think is fascinating in itself. We've always had stories about, I want to make a clone of myself to do the boring work that I don't want to do so that I can do the creative, fun stuff. We've always been playing with that idea, whether with utopian or dystopian stories, and this is the first time we are seeing new developments in reality that are beyond, what humanity thought was possible. If you're nervous about what AI means for you as a creative person, just keep in mind that you don't have to do the creative writing or you don't have to generate a book with AI if you don't want to. If you enjoy the drafting process, if you enjoy the ideation or whatever it is, but you can use it as a replacement for Google for research. You can use it as a proofreader. I think proofreading should be basically free at this point. It should be easy and free to just find mistakes and typos in your manuscript. Developmental editing is a little bit different, but also I always make the same comments on every manuscript I edit, because most new authors make the same mistakes. So I am always pointing out things that new authors do that they shouldn't do, or that they could do better. In other words, when I'm developmental editing, it's not a creative process. I'm just, these are the rules to writing successful fiction that you can apply on any manuscript and make them better. So it's not exactly ones and zeros, but AI is able to look at, comments like the ones that I've made. I really want to train one just like on myself for developmental editing. But AI could learn from people who know what they're doing about what kind of comments to make. And it is pretty good at, if I give it a first chapter, I can say, find the plot holes or the inconsistencies or figure out how to add drama or conflict in this scene. And it can give me some pretty good suggestions. It's a good brainstorming tool. Obviously, we have, AI art for covers or AI narration or, social media automation. I have a friend who's building something where basically I could create a 3D book mock-up for your book. I could upload the entire book. It could pull out a bunch of snippets or excerpts and then make 3 months of social media content that it'll post automatically with pictures and text and everything. That's the stuff that nobody wants to do, but is probably a good idea, that a smart AI tool could kind of give you a marketing assistant to help you to do some of those things that you'll probably never get around to. The point is that there's a lot of different ways to write and publish books. And since most authors are working by themselves on a budget, there are some new tools that make things a lot easier and will allow you to tell more of your stories and make them more professional. It also means that while some services are getting cheaper, that means a lot of the way that the industry was working, we have cover designers, editors, a lot of people working on different services to help indie authors publish. That will be changing or replaced. People will have to find new ways to add extra value if there's no reason, no necessitating principle where they have to have a cover designer. For example, I've made DIY covers for a long time. I try to teach people how to make their own covers so that if they make their own covers, they can make the best possible one. Not saying it'll be better than a professional designer, just better than what they would have done on their own. I have a lot of content like that that's not meant to be the best solution, but it is a cheaper functional solution. And I see that kind of the same way. People who are making a lot of money, they will invest in the best quality that's possible, whether covers or narrators or whatever. But a lot of people who aren't making any money with their book, they simply couldn't afford to have a good cover or an audiobook narration or, do some of the marketing things that the bigger players do. So AI tools will allow the people who were doing it themselves on a budget to produce things of better quality. But since AI will only do what you tell it to, it's still on you to learn the skills of how people tell good stories, the structure, the writing, the craft. There's a lot to learn that most authors aren't familiar with, partially because they believe that, if they're enjoying it, it's going to be good. So they just chase the joy of creation and they put a bunch of words on the page and it feels right to them because they went through the creative process, but it might not hit for readers. So that transition between a creative draft and a solid book project, few people have the kind of skills to edit something like that needs a lot of work, which is why a lot of books are good enough, but they're not, amazing. With covers, for example, you could use AI to make you a book cover, but if you don't know your market, your genre, your story, you may not get the cover that sells the book in the way that you might if you hired a designer who actually knows, it's not just about the design. A real designer would know what is selling in this genre right now. What's the best way to cover this book? So I always struggle with cover design clients because a lot of cover design clients have a very strong idea about what pictures they want on the cover because they're coming from a story standpoint. And I have to tell them, we could do that, but it won't sell your book. And you want to make a cover that will pull in enough of the right type of readers that will convert to a sale, that will actually enjoy the story. There's some expertise involved in the price for paying cover design. It's not just about putting it all together. Even that, going back to my story about getting my driver's license and having a car that makes things easier. When I started doing cover design a long time ago, I would have to manually trace the 100 points around a model and try to pull out the background. I would have to do a lot of heavy work in Photoshop that was time consuming. And there are new Photoshop features built into the tool that replace a lot of that work that I used to have to do manually. So it's kind of like, new designers can make covers so much easier and probably better than I could 10 years ago, but not because they've gained more skills or expertise, just because it's gotten a lot easier. They don't need to put in 10 or 20 hours making a cover. They can do the same amount of work in an hour. It doesn't really hurt anybody. It doesn't really hurt me either, because I was a cover designer. Now I can do the same things faster and better also. But it does seem like, there's some sense of injustice that I had to work hard and new people can do better things with the newer tools. Anyway, I know it's a really big discussion. There is a lot of controversy still. Some of the presentation I gave in Vegas, I want to turn into a nonfiction book about authentic creativity. So I'd love to hear your comments or thoughts or fears about these topics. There's a lot to get into, and I come from a standpoint of literary history and mythology. So I'm more of, what does this mean for humanity on a larger time frame? But I also, even while I want to pursue this subject, it's also true that when I started my blog 10 years ago, I had started a nonfiction book project that I've played with over the years, and I've never really had it come together. The book project I want to work on right now is only really feasible because I can use AI to help offset some of the pressure of dealing with really vast, complex subjects. When I'm trying to edit, this is a pretty, I won't say hefty, but there are, high-level ideas. It's difficult to organize 10 years of ideas together into one book. So I can use ChatGPT, for example, to give it a whole bunch of messy data dumps and different topics and subjects, a lot of the files that I've been sitting on for a long time, random blog posts that I've written in the past. I can now help organize that material together into something I can actually use and work with, which is like, again, having an editorial assistant or someone I'm just paying, here's all my crap, please go through it, organize it. I don't feel like that's the creative work. And those, that's not coming up with the ideas. These are all my own ideas. I'm only using it to try to, because my brain can't handle so much work at the same time. So I would make very slow progress on it and probably never finish it. But now we're at a point where for almost no money, I can use AI tools to help me to develop those concepts and organize them into a book that's, that's collected and concise enough for people to appreciate. So I would love to hear back from you. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you're working on or what tools you're playing with. I'll probably make future YouTube videos about some of the AI tools that you probably haven't heard of yet that are pretty useful in terms of writing and publishing books. And I'm also developing some on my own, just kind of as fun side projects. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.